joining us online. You're good to start at this part of the class, inshallah, when we look at the command to follow the Sunnah in the Quran. There are 60 plus ayat that are explicit ordering us to follow the Prophet ﷺ. Now pay attention to these two terms, okay? When it comes to the command in the Quran to obey. You don't even know where the reference is, but you know this is authentic and you know this is the right way to follow him, alayhi salatu wasalam, so you do it. This one here, Allah says in Surah Ali Imran, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهِ. You heard this verse before? فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So this ayah in Surah Ali Imran uses this word. The Prophet ﷺ is commanded by Allah, go tell the companions, if you truly love Allah, in kuntum tuhibbun Allah, if you really, really love Him, fattabi'uni, then follow me. What's the word that the Prophet ﷺ is using? This one. He doesn't say fa'a'tani. He doesn't use this word. He uses the other one, fattabi'uni. So what is the Prophet ﷺ really encouraging? That if you love Allah, what should you do? Ta'atun is great, but he's encouraging all of us, if you want to build a love that is strong and consistent and sincere and long-lasting love for Allah, the only way you're going to be able to do this is you have to study me. You have to ask about how I ate and slept and communicated and studied, and what my daily routine was, what I did during that, how often I slept, what time I woke. You have to study me, and when you do that, the consequence of studying him is beautiful and simple and powerful, and that is you will have a strong or long-lasting love for Allah just by doing this. So we are not going to only focus on following him, alayhi salatu wasalam. We're going to focus a lot of our study on this. Everybody understand? So this is one of the most important words in Quran that we are ordered, and how we are ordered to follow him, alayhi salatu wasalam. There is another word that is also used, and it specifically refers to his sunnah. In the Quran, Allah refers to the sunnah as hikmah. Okay? Hikmah is another term. Everybody knows what hikmah is, right? وَأَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Allah sent, in Surah An-Nisa, Allah sent for us the book, Quran, and with it He sent a wisdom. why is the sunnah referred to as wisdom? Why is it called that? Because what the sunnah will do for you is that it will open up and allow you to live wherever you are, at whatever generation or time period you live in, with whatever community and culture and environment you belong to, that you will always live in the most appropriate, acceptable, and civilized way that a human being should live. So you will always know what you need to do for survival, what you should eat, what you should stay away from, what exercises you should be involved, and so on and so forth, right? So a quick example to compare these two images is that on the one hand, the sunnah is complete. Did the Prophet ﷺ ever exercise? What was his workout routine? Walking, that's... He used to hike, I have walking. He used to ride, wrestle. Very good. All of these things are right on point. Wrestle, he would walk, he would climb, he would also run. But the stories of him running is also kind of cute. Right? He would be with his wife Aisha radiallahu anha, and when they were alone and the other companions were busy with other things, there was a special area right in front of the masjid, Masjid al-Nabawi, where there's a beautiful garden, and the Prophet ﷺ and his wife Aisha used to spend alone time there just by themselves. It was a beautiful garden that they planted. However, there are narrations of him that he would race Aisha radiallahu anha, and they kind of go back and forth like this. There's even a famous story of Prophet ﷺ racing her. She beat him the first race. So what the Prophet ﷺ did, he doesn't say this, but the explanation narrates to us that after some time, Aisha radiallahu anha, she gained a little bit of weight, so she slowed down. And the Prophet ﷺ is like, okay, I want to race you one more time. And he took advantage of that moment. So the second time, he alayhi salatu wasalam wins the race from Aisha radiallahu anha. So he had this humor behind it, but again, at the end of the, was he like overweight? Or was he pretty slim and fit? He was in between, right? He wasn't like muscular, but a medium built, very average. How tall was he? How tall do you think the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was? Okay, so what do you think is a balanced height that he had, alayhi salatu wasalam? See, what I'm doing is I'm just picking your brains to see what you've learned and heard about some of these things I ask you, right? How tall was he? Around my height, a little bit taller, shorter? Yeah, so between 5'11", even there is one narration that mentions that he was very, very close to 6 feet. Okay, so somewhere in between. What color was his skin? Was he dark? Was he lighter? Was he in between? So he was more towards a lighter complexion, right? Fair skin is how we would refer to an individual, right? He was considered and described as somebody with beautiful fair skin. We even have narrations. Did he have any acne problems or any pimples here and there? The Sahabas described that his face was so beautiful that they sometimes had trouble looking at him, because if they did, their eyes would be fixated on him. And in our day and age, if you look at somebody that way, it's kind of creepy, right? But back then, the Prophet, his companions, they said he was far more beautiful than a beautiful night and the full moon is there. He was more beautiful than that. So he had an appearance and a sense of presence. You know how sometimes you would be around certain people, they don't have to say a word, but you just feel like comfortable? And then there are others, their presence and the chemistry you get and feel when you're around them, you're like, okay, you sit over there. I'm going to sit over here. They don't even say a word to you. So he had this chemistry that was extremely welcoming. And the scholars said it all comes from his smile, or it begins with his smile. He had a beautiful smile. A smile so beautiful, again, some of the companions would train themselves to smile the same way. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu is one of them. Trained himself. He lived with the Prophet ﷺ for about 6 months, so he watched him day and night and tried to replicate and imitate every single thing that he did So this all falls under this entire subject of ta'ah and ittiba'un. Well, like I said, don't trivialize when it's referred to as hikmah in the Quran. Extremely powerful message we get from that as well. Okay, let's move on next. We're going to look at, now we're going to get into 3 grades of hadith, okay? The first one we're going to look at is this. We're going to look at this term that we all hear and know and see and depend on as well. The term sahih. You heard this term before, right? This hadith is sahih. Sahih meaning, or translated as, authentic. Meaning, there is no dispute among scholars that this particular narration is questionable, or they're uncertain about some aspect of it. Everything from the narrators in the chain and to the exact wording is all 100% confirmed and proven. And I'll share with you how that's done in a minute. But the first thing about Sahih is this. Number one is that Sahih is the highest grade that a hadith can have. There is nothing above Sahih. Okay, so the first point is there's nothing, this is the highest grade. When you get here, you are at the most authentic and highest grade of a narration. For something to be Sahih, it needs 5 conditions. If one of these 5 is missing, the entire narration collapses from this category and moves to a lower category. So what are these 5 conditions? Write them down. Here they are. So number 1 is that it must have a continuous chain. Okay, so the narrators, there must be a continuous chain of narrators. So for example, so let's just say this, right? Me, Musleh, said a sentence to Ahmed. Ahmed takes that sentence and he shares it with Fatima. Fatima takes that sentence and she shares it with, I don't know, Maryam, okay? And then Maryam then teaches this narration that came from me to a class, okay? Now somebody in this class took the narration they got from Maryam and they started to share this narration. But when they gave the chain, so when they said, I heard this from Sister Maryam heard it from Ahmed, and who heard it from Musleh. This is what? There's a broken chain. Who did he miss? There was somebody in the center that it completely collapses now from this category, okay? So what we mean, continuous chain, we not only know the names. This is one of the most fascinating things about hadith sciences and even Quran sciences. We can prove anything when it comes to our religion. It's literally one of the most powerful tools that we Muslims are given to prove that Islam is authentic and real and nothing about this religion is man-made. Everything comes ultimately from Allah and the Prophet ﷺ. How do we know this? We know who this Musleh guy is. We know his last name. We know his entire biography, where he lived, who his friends are, when he was born, where his parents were, if he had any siblings. Every ounce of detail we know about this individual. And the same for this person, and this person, and this person. So when you see Sahih in any narration you read, just realize that there are mountains of research involved for this one word to be stamped on that particular narration. Yeah, it's one term, but Asma' Rijal is very specific, focusing on the names, and then in that, it considers the nickname and the kunya, so the laqab and the kunya, all of these things will come under Asma' Rijal. So it's very specific to the names of those narrators. Okay, number 2, integrity. Integrity of narrators. Okay, that's number 2. So every narrator must be a good person. What's an example? Tell me somebody that's just like whatever he or she says, no one will take seriously. It's always questionable. Give me a name. Okay, if you get political, fine, just say it, right? So just think of a name that I was going to say just like any politician, but we don't want to go there, right? But just the integrity in Islam, all the authentic narrations also need to not only define and know and print the biographies of each narrator, but we also have documentation of their lifestyle, their behavior, their conduct with the people. What kind of impression did Umar radiallahu anh have with his people? How did they describe him when they interacted with him? You know, there's a famous story that there was a woman that Umar radiallahu anh, he asked her for marriage. And when he asked her for marriage, she was like gathering her things and she was leaving. She was leaving Medina and going elsewhere. So when he asked her for marriage, she refused and said no. And he asked her why. She said, because you're too strict and I can't live with you and I can't be under your rule. And he took that statement and changed everything about himself. He was already a soft and gentle soul prior to becoming a leader. Prophet ﷺ already groomed him, and he learned and he understood how to keep himself to a certain degree. However, those are the kinds of stories that number 2 is looking for. You're looking for these intimate stories that can only be confirmed because they are accurate and they're full of detail. So we will know who the woman is that he asked for, that she refused him. By the way, just a side point, who would refuse a marriage proposal from Umar radiallahu anhu? And it shows you the power of akhlaq and the strength of being gentle and kind with people. This woman did not care that the one and only Umar is asking her for marriage, because his akhlaq and his approach to things are far more important than his status. So just keep that in mind. Number 3, accuracy. So they must have strong and accurate in their memory. So their accuracy and how, so you can't just say, the Prophet ﷺ says, none of you truly have iman unless you love for your brother what you love for yourself. And then somebody else narrates the narration and says, none of you truly are smart unless you love for your brother what you love for yourself. One word is twisted, and then he said faith, you're saying intelligence. So which one it is? All of that's eliminated. Accuracy must be 100%. So how did they figure this out? How did companions do this? Hadith went through 3 phases to where we have it today, okay? So keep this in mind. These are all part of your notes. When we come to accuracy, write this down, okay? Hadith goes through, or the preservation of hadith, the preservation goes through 3 stages. The first is that it was always memorized. Okay, so you had hifz. So you memorized everything. Nobody was allowed to write during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It was prohibited. You never write anything, especially the words of him ﷺ. Obviously, as time went on, that changed. It then went from hifz. The ummah began to grow. Many could not memorize as well as the previous generation. So what did they end up doing? They end up compiling. They would compile their narration or hadith and words and so on. But who would compile? You don't ask Billy Bob Joe living in the corner, hey, listen, let me tell you a hadith, write it down somewhere and hold that. No. This permission to write down, carve, and compile was given to a selected few. whom the community and leaders knew this is a trustworthy home. This individual, you can trust them. They're never going to twist and turn and alter. They can write something as well. So what the companions did now is that they started to take the skin of like camels and sheep and dry them out in the sun. And once it reached a certain texture, they would use a tool and they would carve out the narration and keep it. And it kind of would be like a personal thing that one home would have. If they didn't do that, they would also carve it out on the mountains, the nearby hills. They would go on big boulders and they would literally scrape them and carve them into the mountain. You want to hear something remarkable? They're still there if you go to Medina. They're still there. The actual carvings of companions, those carvings are still there. You can actually, I don't know if it's open to the public, but over the years, I had a chance, I mean, I lived there for some time, right? So I had a chance to go and climb a certain part of Mount Uhud, and there were literally at least maybe 30 different boulders that all had these incredible cravings onto the boulder, all written in Arabic, the person's name who wrote it, the date that they wrote it, and it was literally stamped. This is what the Prophet ﷺ taught us. So you can still see some of this. So they would find different materials and preserve it this way. The Ummah began to grow even further. That's when it reached to the third stage, where official copies, so official copies are now being made. So this is more towards the third generation Tabi'un period. Now they started to put together official copies. So that's when you start to see that the students of Bukhari, the students of Imam Malik, and all of these individuals who thrived in hadith and excelled in hadith, this is where they got their knowledge from. They were able to preserve and compile all of these narrations. And now you have an official copy of authentic narrations. Next book comes along, you have an official copy that has authentic and also weak or da'if narrations. Then you have a third, these are all the da'if narrations. And this is how they started to categorize and compile to what you see today. Then you go to number four. The fourth condition is that it must have no hidden defects. In Arabic, we call this illa. Okay? Illa. No hidden defects. In other words, there should never be any hidden meanings in any statement or word. There shouldn't be, well, one culture describes a thing a certain way, but another one uses a different word. Shouldn't have any of that. Why? All we care about is what the Prophet ﷺ, what word he used. So the hadith should be free from any of these nuances or hidden defects in the wording. And then you have number 5, which is there is no contradiction. Okay, there is no contradiction. By the way, guys, I excelled in spelling back in the days, and all of that is gone. So there's going to be a lot of words I don't know. I go blank, and I don't know how to spell them. So please help me out if you see something. Okay, so far I'm good. It's sahih, everything you see here so far? Okay, go ahead.
So for no contradiction, have there been any situations where the context is different, so the outcome of
Oh yeah.
is different?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when we get to the next category of hadith and da'if, what is allowed is that you can have one hadith that contradicts another, and you can mesh or fuse them together to get one perspective or one specific hadith that the people can depend on. So you can actually take a hadith that is weak, a hadith that is hasan, not authentic, pull them together and then get a hasan hadith or get a sahih hadith. So you can actually take some of these contradictions, and only scholars can do this as well. You can actually fuse them together as one statement. But that is something that nobody really is allowed to do. You can only do that with, major scholars who specialize in this area, okay? So it doesn't necessarily have to contradict at all.
Bukhari, there are hadiths, two hadiths.
Yeah,
Both has the exactly same son,
yeah,
but their mother is different.
yeah. So let's give an example so it's clear, okay? Same exact hadith, but the wording is different because it's being given to someone else or another town, another village, or another person. Have you heard a hadith that starts like this? A companion came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked, أَيُّ عَمَلٍ أَحَبُّ إِلَى, which is the action that is most beloved to Allah? Have you heard this hadith? Can somebody narrate to me what's the first thing the Prophet ﷺ said? What's the first thing he told the companion when he came and asked him this? The first thing he says to one companion, the best and most beloved action to Allah is as-salatu ala waqtiha, praying and praying on time. Okay, praying on time. Another companion asks him the same question. The answer he gives another companion is the most beloved action to Allah is birrul walidain, being respectful and obedient to your parents. There's a third narration, exact same wording, same question, except the third companion, the first answer is al-jihadu fi sabilillah, to struggle for the sake of Allah or in the path of Allah. All three completely different text, but the exact same question. That is what a sahih hadith has to preserve, is that you cannot have one wording here and then you have another wording of the exact same hadith, but a word is switched here. You can't do that. What has to happen in this case is what scholars would, they would divide the two. They would grade one and grade the other. If both of them are authentic, then they stay in this category. But if one is questionable, we don't know who he was talking to when he answered it here. We don't know the name of the person that asked, so this will take another degree. Then it starts to get confusing for some readers. If you don't study even basic hadith, then the question immediately comes up like, why is this not authentic? I just read the same question the other day. The reason why, different audience, different person. Same question, two completely different answers, okay? The whole point is a sahih hadith must never have the contradiction. It says one thing and another narration says the opposite. You can never have that. It always has to maintain a level of consistency. Do you see now with these 5 conditions, do you understand now why Bukhari, his collection became so famous? Because you know what Bukhari did? There are stories of Bukhari when he heard somebody had a hadith. You know what he did? Got on his horse and he traveled for 3 weeks to find this person. And then when he saw the person that he's going for, that he heard has a hadith that Bukhari didn't find or doesn't know, you know what Bukhari did? Incredibly brilliant, subhanAllah. Instead of going to the person and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I need to know, here, tell me the hadith you know. He hid in a corner and he observed this man for some time. And he saw that this man was feeding his horses, and one horse wouldn't eat. So he began to trick the horse, and he would hide the food behind, and then the horse would get curious, then he would just sort of give it to him. And that's what he would do. So he'd have to sort of trick this horse to thinking one thing, set him up, and this is the way he could get him food. That was enough for Bukhari to reject him, because if he's going to do that to the animal, he's certainly capable of tricking the people. So he rejected this narration. He prayed 2 rak'ats in the Rawda, the gardens of Jannah, in the Prophet's masjid, before he wrote down every single hadith. He was never out of the state of wudu when he did it. So he went through this, and his stories are truly remarkable. And this is where we get these 5 conditions from. We study and get it typically from his journey and how he compiled. I'm going to just add something else. It's not our discussion in this program. It's just something for you to sort of keep in your head. And that is, have you heard of Tirmidhi? Tirmidhi is, like, tell me, what do you know about him? What have you heard about this name? Tirmidhi is a great scholar who also compiled a series of hadith, thousands of them. And he did something that all the other books didn't do, is that he added fiqh with every single hadith. So he added a few halal and haram, what the ulama would say about this particular narration. But he took sahih. You know what he did with that? He took sahih and he added another 6 conditions of sahih of his own. That when you study Tirmidhi, it's not just those 5 I gave you, it's another 6 that you have to study. And he uses terms that scholars literally write books on to explain. We are not going to go there though. That is later down the line, inshallah. Okay, that's with respect to Sahih. Let's look at Hasan. Everybody heard of Hasan Hadith? Okay, Hasan Hadith is all of Sahih, but Hasan Hadith, a hadith will fall into this category because of precision or the memory of that individual. In Sahih, you had to have 100% accuracy in your memorization of the hadith, correct? Hasan Hadith, not really. Like, somebody could say, you know, the Prophet ﷺ said this, and I think this is the word that he used. That's not thrown out of the window. It just would not sit in the category of Sahih. And that is the only condition that isn't complete when it comes to Hasan Hadith. So Hasan Hadith, because we don't need to really write much, it's all that is in Sahih, except when it comes to the accuracy of the narrator. In Hasan, the accuracy isn't 100%, it's like 90%. So think of it like this, you know, yeah, I heard the same opinion. I read it in this book. I just don't remember the title right now, but I read it in this book. It was like the history of something. See all of those words I just threw out? The person compiling will consider all, okay, so at least you know some of the words in the title. You can confirm, we confirm you read something, okay, fine. If you don't know the exact wording, it can still work. So that's Hasan. Last one, Da'if. What is a da'if hadith? A da'if hadith is when a hadith reaches into a category that it can no longer be considered reliable source. It can no longer be used for anything. You can't, it was a fabricated narration. Da'if literally means weak. This is a more accurate translation. Don't use the word fabricated. Use weak instead. Da'if, weak narration. So does that mean that when you see a da'if hadith, just ignore it? What do we do with da'if hadith? We, the average layman Muslim, studying hadith in this day and age, trying to implement the sunnah in our lives, and you come across a da'if hadith, you clearly see it, it's been graded as a weak narration. What do you do with that hadith?
There's many da'if hadith with the same matan. We don't say.
If a da'if hadith with the same text,
We don't say.
technically yes. You can have, okay, you really took us in a different area. I'll get back to that though, but technically yes. You can certainly have a bunch of weak narrations and create a Hasan one. Okay? Because eventually what narrators do is they come to a conclusion that although this narration is weak, how is it that 100 people narrated the exact same weak hadith? And these 100 individuals are good people, right? We can trust them. They're reliable. So how is it so that's when you can start to take all these versions and make one. But again, this is what scholars them do, right? And they come together and they study this process. For you and I, however, a da'if hadith should never be used for the following. So the default is you don't do anything with this hadith. However, because we're in a classroom, we can at least look at some exceptions to this. So the number one thing is that scholars give us is that a da'if hadith should never be used for legal rulings, okay, for fiqh, halal and haram. So tell me, okay, we'll get to the next part. So when it comes to halal and haram, so you have, tell me something that is permitted and it's unanimous, it's authentic in our deen. Tell me something. 100% authentic. Some sort of fiqh thing. You must have wudu before every single prayer. You're not allowed to pray without wudu, right? A da'if narration comes in and says, except if you are a traveler, then you don't have to perform wudu, just pray. What do you do with this? It's literally taking a rule that is unanimously accepted. It's in this category of authentic. You cannot now use that and be like, well, I read it in this book, so, Because why? It has to do with halal and haram, permissible or prohibited, so therefore cannot be used for that. Everybody understand? Number two is that it must never ever, can you use a da'if hadith when it comes to matters of aqidah? Okay, aqidah or the creed of a believer. So your belief system, you can't have a da'if hadith that says La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah and then add another name at the end. Got him? You can't say that, yes, you're praying to Allah, but the Kaaba is right there. Pray to the Kaaba too, because it's pretty awesome. It's right there in front of you. No. You can't ever touch your actual faith and belief system, because that is something, it will alter everything about how you practice your deen if you include something here. What's an example of that? Have you all heard of the hadith of Ramadan? The first part of Ramadan. So Ramadan is split into three parts. The first third is what? The second part of it is? And the third is? So you're saved from the hellfire, right? So you have rahmah, forgiveness, and protection from the fire. Who narrated this hadith? Which book can you find this in? It is unanimously a da'if hadith. You can't use that hadith for anything. It's completely rejected. Why? Because the chain of narrators is literally missing a name. So all of those in that chain, there is a link or an individual that is missing. And there is also another narration by Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah that says that one of the names, an individual in that chain, was somebody that was known to make up stuff about the Prophet ﷺ. His name is in this chain as well. There are several people that have passed on this narration. The point is, if we accepted that hadith about Ramadan, would that now affect the way we believe and interact and journey through the month? How does that affect us? Because the first third of the Ramadan, what are you going to be focused on? What are you going to concentrate on the most? If this hadith was authentic, what would you be doing? You would be doing everything that would count you amongst those whom Allah, what's the first category? You just focus on rahmah, rahmah, rahmah till you get the first third of the month. Then you switch, okay, rahmah, salamu alaikum. Let's go on to the next one. Maghfirah, maghfirah, maghfirah. And Ramadan does not do that. Ramadan does rahmah, maghfirah, and you are exempted or steered away to coming towards the hellfire or anything near the hellfire. It does that every single day of Ramadan. So to categorize one part of Ramadan with just one is inaccurate, and logically it would never make sense because of whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. He is Ar-Rahman all throughout Ramadan. He is Al-Ghaffar all throughout the month. So that would be something that would have an effect on your belief system. And then the other you should never use is when a hadith is severely weak. Severely weak. Oh my God, is that how you spell severely? Severe. There's another E? Where? Here?
Between R and L.
Between. Do we all agree, or there's somebody that I'm not so sure if it's an E or something else, huh? There's no E before L? You see? Is this an authentic Sahih way of spelling the word or not? We have a Hassan narration and we have a...
Anytime there's an LY, you need to drop the E in the English language.
Are you guys serious? Like, there's actually a khilaf amongst us how to spell this word?
Because anytime there's an LY,
Severely.
you gotta drop the E before.
Severe. Okay. Okay, in my notes it says here, yeah. There's an E. Yeah, there is an E. I know. People are just throwing their misguidance everywhere, right? And I'm the one that gets it all. Okay, so that's with respect to da'if hadith. Here, I'm going to summarize this, and then we go on to the next portion, and that's what we would, as a matter of fact, we will pause here, inshallah. One last point about da'if hadith. At the end of the day, what should an average Muslim do with da'if hadith? Leave it alone. Because, write this down as a reminder to you and others, we have enough sahih and hasan hadith to practice our religion completely. So there is technically no need for us to rely on any da'if hadith. Because it is important for the student to be at least be familiar. You know, it's one of those things where it's important to talk about and study and learn in a classroom. If you wouldn't hear, or I wouldn't encourage anybody to give a khutbah on da'if hadith. You wouldn't throw this kind of message into the public. No, this is something that you only discuss in classrooms. So at the end of the day, for our knowledge, we study all the different degrees. As a matter of fact, I have about 20 volumes of da'if hadith textbooks in my office. Yeah. That's why, exactly, and that's why it is not meant for the public. Students like yourselves can understand this far better. So at the end of the day, the goal is, what do we do with all of this? Leave da'if hadith alone. Inshallah, all of us can still get Jannah and practice our religion completely with all of the authentic and hasan hadith that we have, okay? Jazakallahu khairan wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Next week, inshallah, we will do a few more introductory points and we will start the intro to Imam an-Nawawi's book, inshallah, okay? So keep that in mind. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.